everyone. So I was thinking we could take our time leading into this one today, have a little bit of a casual chat, it's not like we have anything important to talk about, so, let's just take our time with this one and really who am I kidding? My name is Rebecca, and it's time to talk about the waterfall scene! Okay, I gotta take this thing off, it doesn't feel right. So I haven't exactly made a secret of the fact that the last few minutes of The Abominable Bride are my favorite part of the entire show. I'm ready for that to change in just a few short weeks. But until we get to the big revelations in store for the untitled third episode of Series 4, these last few minutes are as blatant as Mark and Steven have gotten with their intent for the show. I've been telling you that this episode was the one that solidified my belief in TJLC and got rid of all of those nagging little doubts. And I've shared some of the reasons for that. The way we predicted the episode when the writers were lying to us about it, the way John leaving Sherlock was all part of a terrible nightmare and that was the whole point, the way they wrote us into an episode and told us we were right and that we must win, and those things did all help. But what really sold it for me was how crystal clear they made things in these last few minutes. Both in terms of what our title character wants, and with regards to Mark and Steven telling us what drove them to make this adaptation in the first place. And it might seem like I'm placing a lot of importance on a very small part of the show. You might think it might not matter this much, but we know it does. Because I have to know everything about this show, I got the DVD for this episode right after it came out. And one of the bonus features on the DVD is a video diary Mark filmed on what he saw as the most important day of filming for The Abominable Bride. Guess what scene he picked?
This is, waterfall day.
So tell us what we're doing today.
Well, today we're having the most exciting moment of our joint lives. We are throwing Moriarty and Sherlock Holmes off the Reichenbach Falls. It involved a deer stalker, it involved the line elementary, my dear Watson. It involved a waterfall actually in the studio.
We've sort of been here before, but not quite like this.
This is the... Given that it's us, this is the most over-dweeby we've ever been. And I know we've really, there are many events in our lives that compete for that title. But what I'm looking at right now is it's insane. It's wonderful. Would you remember also first pitching this and saying, it'll be modern Sherlock Holmes. It's not that old version. It's we're staying away from all the Victorian trappings, the nonsense of it adhered to over the years. You just put it all back. I'm very excited about the way that waterfall looks because for the first time I think ever, the Reichenbach Falls scene looks like it does in the stories. The narrow pathway, the unclimbable backdrop, all of it, it's all there. And it looks a bit studio.
The Reichenbach of the mind, isn't it?
Yes, extremely exciting. The whole day, Mark? You're doing the whole day?
Yeah, the whole day.
Blimey.
First of all, I hope you're ready for the next one of these that we're going to be getting when Series 4 comes out, which will literally end with fireworks, but they're clearly excited about this one. And I do believe part of that is recreating this scene from the canon. But knowing that they changed that scene is hugely important to understanding their enthusiasm here. This is made blatant in another bonus feature. Mark talks about how part of the point of this scene is how Sherlock is always destined to end up with Moriarty, except they changed the story, and they go on to show that part of the scene.
This is Waterfall Day. This has been anticipated for a very long time. I had this idea a long time ago to try and actually do the Reichenbach Fall because in our version we obviously had Sherlock going off the top of Bart's Hospital. We never really got to do the version from Conan Doyle.
Sherlock! Sherlock.
It seemed irresistible to me to actually have the final confrontation at the falls.
It's a shade melodramatic, don't you think?
For you and me? Not at all.
Really, this is now the ultimate confrontation here at the Reichenbach Fall.
What are you? You know what I am. I'm Moriarty, the Napoleon of crime.
You can have all kinds of different shades of villainy, but I suppose in the end, Moriarty is always the ultimate. The word is a byword for villainy.
Moriarty's dead.
Not in your mind. I'll never be dead there. You once called your brain a hard drive. Well, say hello to the virus.
Sherlock Holmes will be forever linked with Moriarty.
It has to be together, doesn't it? At the end, it's always just you and me.
They also allude to the importance of Sherlock's final line on the waterfall.
Watching it on the screen, when we get to elementary, my dear Watson, it makes me fill up. It's like, it's a summation, I think, of everything we've done, but we've waited, we've never done the line, and then it actually, I think, happens in absolutely the perfect place.
That's, I hope, the way this works for the audience. I hope is just when you think you've had all the treats you can have.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Here's one more.
Between you and me, John, I always survive a fall.
But how?
Elementary, my dear Watson.
So this part of the episode is important for a lot of reasons. It's the climax of this episode, and I really see it as a turning point for the show, mostly because it's a turning point for Sherlock. For the entirety of this episode, Sherlock has been pushing down his fear that he'll have to face Moriarty again, and his fear that he ruined things with John permanently because of the events of the Reichenbach fall, his regret that he should have included John, his desire to go back and do things over again. That's exactly what he does here. He goes back to the very moment that's been hanging over his head for the entirety of this dream, his confrontation with Moriarty on the roof of St. Bart's, and elevates it to a dramatic showdown on a precarious cliff's edge. We know that's from the stories, but Sherlock doesn't. So this scene matches his extreme emotions. The whole episode, the whole series, has been building up to this. Let's see how it unfolds. So when we left off, Sherlock dreamt that he was being dragged down to hell by the ghost of a murderous bride and woke up on the waterfall. When he registers his surroundings, Sherlock Riley remarks that he obviously still isn't awake.
Oh, I see. Still not awake, am I?
Again, he didn't realize that last part was a dream, which explains why his fears got a lot more direct rather than playing out through mirror characters. As the camera pans back, the musical score gives us another hint about what this scene is really about, as John's chords swell. Here at last, he's gone to the root of everything. This is finally what this whole episode has been about.
Too deep, Sherlock, way too deep. Congratulations, you'll be the first man in history to be buried in his own mind palace.
Since this is the deepest part of Sherlock, we know we're about to see his deepest fears and his deepest desires. Sherlock points out the ridiculous setting, but Moriarty says it's appropriate for them.
The setting's a shade melodramatic, don't you think?
For you and me? Not at all.
Again, we know it's appropriate because this is where this confrontation traditionally plays out. But for Sherlock, the setting illustrates how high the stakes are here. Sherlock asks what this version of Moriarty is and why he's tormenting him, and Moriarty mocks him for the dramatic way he's described him in the past.
What are you?
You know what I am. I'm Moriarty, the Napoleon of crime.
After all of this, Sherlock still insists that Moriarty must be dead. And rather than correct him, Moriarty just states the real source of the problem, that he'll never be dead in Sherlock's mind.
Moriarty's dead.
Not in your mind. I'll never be dead there. You once called your brain a hard drive. Well, say hello to the virus.
I haven't really gotten into Moriarty as a representation of Sherlock's fears, but he only represents that because of what he is in real life, and because Sherlock is still afraid of Moriarty himself. But we will see here that Moriarty is the manifestation of all of Sherlock's fears, regrets, and weaknesses. So this line is about Sherlock being faced with the idea that he'll never be free of his fears and his regrets. He'll never change the fact that he lied to John and went to that roof alone. He'll never make that right. Moriarty will always be there to remind him of his shortcomings. Moriarty starts talking about how they're always going to end up here.
This is how we end, you and I. Always here, always together.
This is about Sherlock's fear, but it's more than that. Since Sir Arthur Conan Doyle decided to kill off Sherlock Holmes on the Reichenbach Fall, it's been a part of the story. Even though maybe it shouldn't have been, it was only included as part of Doyle's frustration. But the story has been retold the same way time and again, with no real change. Sherlock Holmes will always have to face off against Moriarty, and ultimately he will always end up alone. There's nothing new under the sun. Sherlock plays along with Moriarty's interest to try to get advantage of the situation, something he's done in real life, and compliments him with the hopes of throwing him off.
You have a magnificent brain, Moriarty. I admire it. I concede it may even be the equal of my own.
I'm touched. I'm honored.
But when it comes to the matter of unarmed combat on the edge of a precipice, you're going in the water. Short ass.
He thinks he can defeat Moriarty, or at least he's putting on a brave face. He's trying to be strong. Maybe if he were stronger, things wouldn't be ruined right now. But that's not the solution. Moriarty easily overpowers him, taunting Sherlock about how he's not strong, not with him.
Oh, you think you're so big and strong, Sherlock? Not with me!
Moriarty knocks Sherlock to the ground and hits him repeatedly, accentuating each physical blow with a verbal one.
I am your weakness! I keep you down! Every time you stumble, every time you fail, when you're weak, I am there!
Again, this is his deepest fear. He'll never be free. There's no use fighting it.
No. Don't try to fight it! Lie back and lose!
Moriarty picks up Sherlock and drags him to the edge. Not to throw him over, but so that they can go over together. They're going to be stuck in a violent embrace forever. That's Sherlock Holmes' tragic destiny, right?
Shall we go over together? It has to be together, doesn't it? At the end, it's always just you and me!
You know what's coming now, but pretend for a moment that you don't. Because they've taken this confrontation between Sherlock and Moriarty and placed it in its original canon context, and have had Moriarty repeatedly yell about how it's always like this, here, more than ever, it's obvious that the writers are talking about the canon and every other adaptation of Sherlock Holmes. It's always been like this, with no difference. There's no changing it. The story has been like this every time. So let's then introduce the idea that the writers have done this to indicate that there will finally be a change. That they've written this scene to tell us that it won't always be this way. That something new is finally happening. What is the change? What do they change about this moment in particular? How do they fix this? They do the only thing that could be done. John Watson arrives, taking his place as if he had always been meant to be there. And suddenly, we have a whole new story.
It has to be together, doesn't it? At the end, it's always just you and me!
Look at Sherlock's face here. This is everything he wants. For John to swoop in and save him from Moriarty's unwanted attentions.
Professor, if you wouldn't mind stepping away from my friend, I do believe he finds your attention a shade annoying.
It's a romantic moment for Sherlock as a character, but it's about so much more. Moriarty protests and says this isn't fair, and John's reply tells us all we need to know.
That's not fair, there's two of you.
There's always two of us. Don't you read The Strand?
We can still interpret The Strand as a reimagining of John's blog. And so this moment is Sherlock realizing, of course John loves him. His blog is only like that because John loves him. But that's not the reason I love this line. This exchange is Moriarty, who I'll be explaining soon represents a certain kind of Holmes fan, declaring that this change, suddenly having it be about Sherlock and John, together, inseparable, undefeatable, is unfair. John says it's not. because it's not a change. It's the same story it has been since The Strand. And that was the selling point to me. Because before then, I thought that if the writers were doing this, which they probably were, they were doing it as a version of the story, as an alternate reading. And so there was room for doubt. This scene makes it clear that that's not how they see it. What they're doing is unveiling the true story of the Holmes canon. In their minds, they're not changing anything. They're telling the story the way it always should have been told. And they're thrilled about it. That's what made me so sure. Because they tell us here that the whole reason they're making this show is to reveal an element of the stories that everyone has been getting wrong, but that they think they can get right. In that scene, when John mentions his stories, he throws Sherlock back his hat.
There's always two of us. Don't you read The Strand?
And I think this is Sherlock seeing the way John presents him in a whole new light. It's a way he presents him because he admires and loves him and wants him to look brave in front of his enemies. It's not an expectation that John really needs him to fill. Once John is there, Moriarty is defeated so easily. A precursor of what's to come.
On your knees, Professor. Hands behind your head.
On a more personal level, this is all it takes for Sherlock to overcome his demons. One clear moment of understanding that John loves him and will choose him. Of course he will. Sherlock thanks John for saving him, and for the first time in this episode, he uses his first name. Up until now, first names have been reserved either for family members or for spouses. In this world, first names are intimate. So John draws attention to it.
Thank you, John.
Since when do you call me John?
Sherlock, happier than we've ever seen him, tells John that he'd be surprised about how long he's felt that way about him. But John says he wouldn't.
You'd be surprised.
No, I wouldn't.
Again, this is all of Sherlock's deepest desires playing out in front of him. And that's another comment on the purpose of this adaptation. Since when have they been calling each other Sherlock and John? Maybe it's been the whole time. John immediately reciprocates Sherlock's affections and switches to calling him Sherlock rather than Holmes. He tells him to wake up, that he knows he's in a story.
Time you woke up, Sherlock. I'm a storyteller. I know when I'm in one.
John, the romantic storyteller, obviously recognizes when he's part of a fairy tale ending.
Of course. Of course you do, John.
Again, Sherlock is so sure here. After all of that inner turmoil, he finally knows. That's why we had to have this episode. Because without it, Sherlock was still too far away from where he needed to be emotionally by the end of Series 4. With the emotional growth he's had over the course of this episode, all we need now is for John to have the same revelation. John, jealous of his own goddamn self, asks what he's like in real life, almost as if to make Sherlock admit his feelings.
So what's he like? The other me, in the other place.
Sherlock downplays it, saying John is smarter than he looks. John says he must be pretty smart, indicating that Sherlock thinks John is already handsome, so he must be even smarter than that, and Sherlock agrees.
Smarter than he looks.
Pretty damn smart, then.
Pretty damn smart.
Can we all just take a second to appreciate that this is what they're going to be like in Series 5? Like, flirting in front of the bad guy and the whole thing? It's gonna be unbearable. Here, Moriarty cuts in and suggests that they elope.
Ugh, why don't you two just elope, for God's sake?
Moriarty has no more place here, though, and elopement suggests that they couldn't be legally married, that they'd have to run away like they would have in the Victorian era. John says it's rude of Moriarty to intrude.
Impertinent.
And Sherlock says it's wrong of Moriarty to suggest they'd have to hide. We can thank Stephen Moffat's actually married Johnlock AU for giving us the key to decoding this line.
Offensive.
And her suspiciously intimate companion.
I resent your implication of impropriety. We are married.
Just a reminder, he did that. He already wrote them being married in the Victorian era. He did that, but they're actually going to get married. Sherlock fantasizes about agreeing to it right here, and Moriarty is defeated when they agree to be together.
Actually, would you mind?
Not at all.
It was my turn.
What's that?
It really was his turn, in so many ways. He should have been there all along, both in the canon and at Bart's. But Sherlock has finally forgiven himself for that now, and the writers have put that injustice from the canon to right. With the ghost of Moriarty defeated, the dream can end. And after an entire episode of doubt and confusion, and Sherlock being sure that falling in love, would be deadly because of the harsh landing, suddenly, he's not afraid to fall anymore.
So how do you plan to wake up?
Oh. I should think like this.
John asks if he's sure, and Sherlock is. He has no more doubt that he'll survive.
You sure?
Between you and me, John, I always survive a fall.
But how?
The context tells us how. How did he push past all of his fear here? He realized that John would always be there for him. It's the same answer. Sherlock isn't afraid to fall anymore, because he knows now that his dear John will catch him when he lands.
Elementary, my dear Watson.
He throws away the hat. He doesn't need to put on the persona anymore. He's going to wake up and include John and trust that John won't abandon him or let him down, and takes a leap of faith. As he falls, he smiles hugely, and that doesn't make sense in any other context except with the understanding that Sherlock's just realized that he's going to have his happy ending. He wakes up back on the plane, and immediately his eyes search for John. When he finds him, he smiles with all the tenderness in the world. The mask is gone.
Miss me?
He uses that line because he's not afraid anymore. John hovers protectively over Sherlock, and in the background, you can see Mary's concern at Sherlock's newfound vulnerability. She watches to see how John will react.
Sherlock, you all right?
Yes.
Mary cuts in, and rather than becoming distraught like he did earlier, Sherlock just shrugs her off. It doesn't matter now. He knows John will pick him.
Of course I am. Why wouldn't I be?
You should probably just OD'd. You should be in hospital.
No time. I have to go to Baker Street now. Moriarty's back.
Mycroft mentions that he hopes that having something to do will save Sherlock from his drug use.
I almost hope he is. If it'll save you from this.
The fact that Mycroft already has the drugs list is another piece of evidence that that first plane scene was real, as is the fact that no one here is surprised to find him drugged, because they had already found him in the first scene, which was real. Good. Established. Sherlock says he doesn't need drugs anymore. He has the real thing.
No need for that now. I've got the real thing. I have work to do.
It sounds like this is about Moriarty's return on the surface, but remember, he took the drugs because he was leaving John forever. It was a last bit of comfort. Maybe he even actually intended to have a hallucination about his life with John as he faded away. But now he doesn't need that. He has the real thing. Mycroft tries again to reach out to Sherlock, but Sherlock blames Mycroft for not doing more to protect him. You can see in the background that Mary is amused by this.
Sherlock, promise me?
What are you still doing here? Shouldn't you be off getting me a pardon or something? Like a proper big brother?
And Mycroft hasn't actually protected Sherlock. He can't. He relies on John to do it for him. And John takes his responsibility very seriously.
Dr. Watson. Look after him. Please.
Sherlock is right. He will always be there. You can feel free to speculate all you like about the contents of Mycroft's notebook. All I take out of it is a confirmation that we will definitely be seeing what happened with Redbeard in Series 4. Outside, John tells Sherlock to explain how Moriarty is alive, and Sherlock says he isn't.
Sherlock, hang on. Explain. Moriarty's alive then?
I never said he was alive. I said he was back.
Mary seems very relieved about this.
So he's dead.
Sherlock says that no one survived shooting themselves in the head, even though Amelia Ricoletti did, and claims the overdose was to prove Moriarty was dead. He looks guiltily at John when he says that part.
Of course he's dead. He blew his own brains out. No one survives that. I just went to the trouble of an overdose to prove it.
Because we saw his dream, we know all of this is a lie, right down to the motivation for the overdose. I think he'd tell John the truth here, but Mary is right there, and we have reasons to suspect that Sherlock thinks she's the one resurrecting Moriarty, so he can't really talk about plans in front of her. As Sherlock says he knows what Moriarty will do next, he smiles warmly at John again and leads him into the next adventure.
Moriarty is dead. No question. But more importantly, I know exactly what he's going to do next.
And they finally leave the tarmac. Thank God. That was the longest 20 minutes of anyone's life. But that's not all. There's one more treat right at the end. I've mentioned before that I read this scene as the only standalone part of the episode, and we do have interviews to back that reading up.
We also ended up with an unexpected thing, really, in that last scene where the credits roll and then it suddenly goes back to Baker Street and Sherlock says to John, this is my idea of what the future might be like. So, which really poses the possibility that the entire series, our series, is just the fevered imaginings of a real Victorian man.
Right.
So maybe the whole thing is just a Victorian man's idea of the future.
Oh, don't start.
I'm not entirely convinced that this is literal, although if it is, I think we can expect one more Victorian scene, where Holmes and Watson talk about how they didn't have to wait for the future to be together, because they were all along, which is something I'm definitely in favor of. But at the very least, this scene is about presenting the show as what the original Holmes would have wanted. Mark and Stephen have said before that the highlight of the stories is always Holmes and Watson together sitting in front of the fire, because it's that relationship that draws you in. We finally get to see that scene here, and Holmes and Watson are so affectionate towards each other here.
Flying machines, these telephone contraptions? What sort of lunatic fantasy is that?
It was simply my conjecture of what a future world might look like and how you and I might fit inside it.
From a drop of water, a logician should be able to infer the possibility of an Atlantic or a Niagara.
Or a Reichenbach.
They also keep noticeably putting pipes in their mouths after every second, but I've talked about that in another video. The elephant is back in place here, because the silence isn't broken in this scene, but it's as close as it's come. This Holmes loves the stories, and he works with Watson on how they're presented.
Have you written up your account of the case?
Yes.
Modified to put it down as one of my rare failures, of course.
Of course.
Again, as it always should have been and always was. Holmes enthusiastically lists off title ideas, and Watson suggests making it about an evil bride.
The Adventure of the Invisible Army. The League of Furies? The Monstrous Regiment.
I rather thought the Abominable Bride.
Trifle lurid.
It'll sell. It's got proper murders in it, too.
You're the expert?
Speaking of which, there's no mention of Watson's wife in this scene. Interesting choice. Watson asks Holmes about the story he just recounted, pointing out that it was a bit out there, and Holmes admits he might have gotten carried away.
As for your own tale, are you sure it's still just a 7% solution that you take? I think you may have increased the dosage.
Perhaps I was being a little fanciful.
But then he amends his statement, and look at the longing on his face here and tell me what this is about.
But perhaps such things could come to pass.
Here's a hint. It's not about iPhones. It's about what else is possible in the future. A world where Holmes and Watson don't have to be afraid to be together. Holmes says he'd be at home there. Watson doubts he would be, but Holmes insists he would. It's crucial that they're in that future together. Otherwise, what's the point?
In any case, I know I would be very much at home in such a world.
Don't think I would be.
I beg to differ.
Holmes then declares that he never belonged in the Victorian era.
But then I've always known I was a man out of his time.
Sherlock Holmes, who could be considered to be the seminal character of the Victorian era, who was created for and published in the serial format, the medium of the Victorian era, was a man out of his time. I wonder what that could be referring to. Another hint here is that Holmes and Watson don't refer to each other by any names here, so we don't know if they would call each other Holmes and Watson or Sherlock and John. That's another hint that we might be coming back to 1895 someday, just so the writers can be sure that everyone gets the point. Holmes dreams of the world of BBC Sherlock, because it's where the true story, after 130 years of waiting, will finally be told. The world will finally know that Sherlock Holmes and John Watson were always in love. And that's why this scene is my favorite part of the show. Thank you very much for indulging me and sticking all the way through this. If you liked it, you can support the show by contributing subtitles or by becoming a patron on Patreon. Links to both of those can be found below, as well as links to everything else I referenced. You may notice that I have apparently run out of content to cover, but I've also mentioned that I plan to release 48 videos before Series 4, so what's still to come? Since I'm on a bit of a time crunch at this point, I feel comfortable releasing a schedule for the remaining videos. Although keep in mind, I'm currently in my final semester of grad school, so if a video is a day or two late, try not to panic. I'm doing my best. With that in mind, here's what you can look forward to. Next Thursday, November 17th, I'll be putting out a video on some of the supplementary materials. The original intent was to cover all of the blogs, all of the books, and Sherlock the Network app. But like I've said, I've fallen a bit behind and I'm on a serious time crunch. And there's a lot to cover on the blogs alone. So maybe just go into it assuming that I'm just gonna cover the blogs and be pleasantly surprised if I get to anything else. November 22nd, I'll be talking about one of the main influences on BBC Sherlock, the private life of Sherlock Holmes, and the many ways it has influenced the show. This is going to be important to cover for one of the later videos. Episode 43 will cover Moriarty and be an explanation of most of M theory, but part of it will be saved for episode 44, where I'll be talking about Mycroft and his role in the show, including how he's been roped into Moriarty's scheme. With all of that established, we'll be ready to do a thematic analysis of the entire show and how everything, including M theory, fits together to create one unifying message. And knowing that message is the best way to predict what's to come. At that point, it's just build up to series 4, with a recap of both Sherlock and John's emotional journeys over the course of the entire series, and where they have left to go before they're ready to finally be together. One has a lot more work left than the other, but neither of them are quite there yet. And finally, there will be a recap of all the information we've gotten this past year, and what we can expect for series 4. And the day after that, the 6th Thatchers comes out. The end is actually in sight. I'm really honored that so many of you have stuck with me and the way this channel has grown, and I hope you enjoy this closing section. Until then, thank you so much for watching, and get ready to believe. Okay, so here's one of the reasons I made this episode. I read comments, I see you, I don't always respond, but I see you, and one of the things I see a lot is people mentioning how they think it's funny that the episode is sometimes just as long or longer than the episode itself. And, you know, I get it. I do intentionally make these videos unreasonably long to kind of keep them from getting too far out there, so it's still kind of a secret. You have to dedicate a certain amount of time to getting all the information. You know, if I just like splice these up into little 2 to 5 minute things, then it would be a lot more shareable, which is what I don't want. But like it's like people don't realize that I have to cut out so much to keep it around the length of the episode. Like if I were to cover everything, it would be several times longer than the actual episode. Do you realize that? So yeah, so the Abominable Bride in general was a testament to how much I've been cutting things out, and this scene in particular, I wrote 4,000 words almost on a less than 10-minute scene. That's how in-depth you could go with it if you wanted to. And I still like alluded to things I talked about before and didn't go into them fully in depth, so I'm holding back on you guys a lot, and I want you to realize that. I mean, I still cover everything eventually because I have so many topics going, so eventually, over the course of it, I do get to everything, almost, that I want to, but anyway, thanks for indulging me. I've been in a cheery mood. Thanks. Looking forward to the rest of it. Gotta go work on writing down those blogs. Bye!